Am I the asshole for giving my son a bill for half his expenses? My son, 17, asked me for a new gaming system and I said no because he already has plenty of gaming systems and games and doesn't need more. If he wants one he can save up and buy one. He then comes to me with a budget on how we can afford the system. It was mostly just that if I buy nothing for myself for 2 months, we'll have enough for the system. I told him hell no, it's offensive and if he wants the system he has to save up for it. Then he comes back with another budget. He and his father calculated how much I've been paid in child support over the years and they decided it would be a good idea to let me know how little a drop in the bucket the gaming system would be. I told him I spend that on his expenses every month but he didn't believe me, so I told him that if he doesn't think so, he can pay me for his expenses every month and I'll give him the child support. Surprise surprise, when I gave him the bill, it showed that when you factor in all of the things I pay for in a month, it's much more than child support. Child support doesn't even cover 30%. Now my ex is yelling at me for making our son feel like an expensive burden, but I think I was teaching him a lesson about money and unteaching him some of what my ex says about support. Am I the asshole for giving him a bill? ETA. Not able to comment, but just wanted to say this isn't a question of being able to afford the console. I can afford it, but that doesn't mean he should just get it. Not the asshole. You told him no and then his father, who probably thinks he pays an exorbitant amount of child support to fund your lavish lifestyle, decided to put his 2 cents worth in and it blew up in his face. You countered his budget with the actual household expenses. He's not mad because you made your son feel like an expensive burden, he's mad you embarrassed him and made him look a fool for all of his presumptions about your monthly household costs. Not the asshole. If his father wants to interject, why doesn't he buy the system? That being said, I would sit down and explain that he isn't a burden but new gaming systems are a luxury item. You can maybe help him come up with a strategy to save his own money or suggest he take on work outside the home. He is going to be an adult soon. Not the asshole your son was way out of line to come to you with his child support numbers. That was dad stirring the pot, but your son's 17 and was being an ass. Go to your kid and tell him that you knew he was going to be expensive when you had him and that you love him more than money and always will. P.S. Your ex is a douche who doesn't like his kid knowing how much more you've done for your son financially. Not the asshole. It would have been an asshole move to give your son a bill just to shame him, but that's not what you did. Your son was incredibly entitled and rude to you. He and your ex both implied you take the child support and spend it on yourself. You proved otherwise. And you're right. You did teach him a lesson about finances and how expensive it is to raise a child. Edit. Also, not that this isn't obvious, but a gaming system isn't a necessity. It's important you also explain to him the difference between a want and a need. Bills, food, clothing, toiletries all need to come before luxuries. Not the asshole I love how his dad feels entitled to all of his own paychecks after the small percentage he pays in child support and he feels your son is entitled to 100% of your income because he pitches in a small bit of his own. Face with rolling eyes. Not the asshole. If your son had all that time to come up with a budget so that you could afford to get a new gaming console, I'm assuming PS5 maybe, then he can take that time and look for a part-time job to buy the console himself. You didn't give him the bill expecting him to pay it, but to give him an idea of just how expensive raising a child is. If your ex is yelling at you about your bills, then he can either chip in for the system, up the child support, or keep his nose out of your finances. Not the asshole. Well played. He needs to learn. Sounds like his dad does too. Why on earth doesn't his dad buy it for him if he thinks it's such a good idea? Not the asshole your ex was being rude helping your son scheme to try and guilt you into buying him something expensive saying child support would cover it. Your son was also being rude suggesting you not spend any of your hard-earned money on yourself and accusing you of not using child support to cover his expenses. I think this is a good lesson for your son. As a teenager myself I understand how a lot of kids don't understand the value of money and I think this is a good way to teach him. You never said he was a burden, you just showed him how much you spend on him so he would understand why you didn't wanna buy him something so expensive that he doesn't need out of nowhere. That was an entitled way to act assuming he deserves it for no reason. Not the asshole. Your son is almost an adult and if he views pressuring someone to going without so he can have what he wants then he needs to learn a lesson. Your ex sucks for drafting that second budget with your son based on child support over the years. Not the asshole. Reassure your son of how much you love him and have never regretted the expense, and point out to his dad that if he feels so strongly that your son deserves the console, maybe he could use some of the money he's saved by not being main carer to buy it. Not the asshole. Although I would clarify to your son that he is not an expensive burden, he's a child. You do not mind at all paying for everything it takes to take care of him, but every new gaming system he wants is not on the list of childhood necessities. I gotta say, not the asshole. It was a good lesson to teach, and you son wouldn't take no for an answer. My solution is, if he doesn't play on the other systems at all anymore, have him sell those and use that money as the beginning of saving for the new system. Not the asshole. He needs to learn about money. Also, his dad is a dick, and if he wants your kid to have a new gaming system so badly, he can damn well buy it. Not the asshole. He tried to play you, so you flipped the script on him. If he wants it, tell him to get a job and earn it. Of course, on this economy he can't so double victory. He should join the PC master race anyway. Don't let your kid grow up to be a scrub. Not the asshole. If you were merely in the habit of ranting to your son about how expensive he is, you would be ta. But in this case, I think you rightly gave him a reality check. Even if you could easily afford to buy him a gaming system, it's an expensive recreational item that only he wants and that only he would use. He is nearly an adult and can save up to buy it himself. And for him to ask for something expensive, and you to say no, and him to come back and repeatedly try to convince you to get it for him anyway, not once but twice. You were well within your rights to take the tack that you did. Not the asshole. Ha ha ha, this reminds me of some of the things my dad would say. When I was in my 3rd year of uni, he was furious when I told him I was running low on money and planned to get a part-time job to make up the difference. He said something about how he gave my mum all this money for a college fund and she must have spent it on herself. I asked my mum about it. It was only $11,000, enough to pay for like 1 semester of tuition and living expenses, and my older sister had used most of it. He just had no idea how much our expenses were. He also never paid any child support, so I would not have blamed my mum for 1 second if she had used that money. Some dads, man. Hold the phone. Dad throws the fact that he pays child support to support his child in your face, drags your child into it in an attempt to weaponize him against you, and you're the one that's making your son feel like a burden. Your ex is a pro at embarrassing himself. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. Your ex was way out of line, like notify the courts that he's attempting to poison your relationship, out of line. Your son has learned some pretty awful entitlement from him that needs deprogramming. Not the asshole. If your ex is so worried about it, why doesn't he just buy the system himself? LMAO. 17 is also plenty old enough to start taking financial costs of things seriously and not just be handed everything you ask for. Hell, my sister saved up for her own computer when she was around 12. Your nearly legal adult son can certainly figure out how to do the same. Not the asshole. Your ex was poisoning your son's mind and you simply corrected it. Not the asshole. First, he wanted proof, and second, at 17, he may need a sense of the cost of living. And third, he was believing his father's whispered suggestions that you were living large on money he could have used. There's a strong possibility he isn't upset over how his son feels, but how his son thinks about him at the moment. As long as your son knows you think he's worth it, he'll be fine. Not the asshole. It's totally fair that you told him if he wants the system he has to save up. I was all set to say YTA because of all the times I've heard of parents on this sub trying to charge their minor children for living with them. But you didn't give him a bill. You broke down your real-life expenses to teach him about the value of money. Upfront and open dialogue about the household expenses and how far a dollar will stretch will probably go a long way in dealing with this sense of entitlement he has. Educate him on wants and needs, and that if he wants something he needs to work for it. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. This is a good conversation to have with your kid, and a lot of divorced parents need to have it. I remember my mother calmly breaking down the expenses for my brother and I when one of us snapped some snotty bullshit about child support at her. She had to do it again when my brother turned 18, because my dad quit paying child support that very moment. My brother was snotty about his friend's parents keeping the kid's bedroom so he had a soft place to come home to, whereas my mom had to immediately downsize, which made him feel unwelcome. She had to explain that a 3-bedroom apartment costs more than a 2-bedroom apartment. Kids don't pop out of the womb with worldly wisdom. Part of a parent's job is curing them of their idiocy. Not the asshole cannot specify this enough. You are amazing, please know that. It's a great lesson for a teenager. Not the asshole. His dad sounds like 17-year-old. NTA. Real life comes with real consequences. Not the asshole. Sometimes kids and ex-partners need to know how much is actually spent on them. My son's father told him I was stealing his money and buying myself what I wanted. I showed my son what his dad sends and how much it cost to support him. It was definitely more than what he sends. I love the amount of back-patting in these threads. Not the asshole. 17 years old is certainly old enough to understand household finances. He should have done a bit more research for his calculations. Your ex is definitely an asshole for his part. 18-year-old male here whose father also pays child support to his mother, although it stops in 4 weeks when my sister turns 18 if that's relevant. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. Your son is practically an adult and will soon be completely responsible for himself in every sense. How he came to the conclusion that he's entitled to a $300 to $500 system is beyond me. There's nothing wrong with a 17 or even 18-year-old parents still providing for them, but an expensive console is not a necessity. So much not the asshole. In fact, sounds like solid parenting to me. Absolutely not the asshole. I want a new computer that'll easily cost a few thousand. I'm a 17F and I decided to get a job at minimum wage. If I can get one, he can too. Since he has time to game, he has time to work. I've worked for about a month and have $700 saved up. Your son is a bit rude to not accept no for answer. His father is rude for yelling at you and not teaching his son how child support works, and you are an asshole for making your son feel that way. Trust me, as a daughter to 2 parents who do that exact thing, you make us feel like trash and that we're just a burden on you. Don't do that shit. Not the asshole. Gaming systems are a luxury extra. Not the asshole. Tell him he can sell his old systems to buy the new one. Even though you and your ex are legally responsible for housing him and feeding him and making sure he has necessary essentials, it's good for your son to know that eventually supporting himself will require that he pay for non-fun things, and that things like new gaming systems are luxuries that need to be planned for. Make sure he understands that you showed him this, not to imply he's a burden, but to help him have greater respect for what you do to make sure he has a comfortable life. The point is to give him a reality check, not to make him feel like he's not worth what you're spending. Not the asshole. I think it's a good life lesson for people to know exactly how much their lifestyle costs. Not the asshole at all. I have kids that age and they don't get how much everyday bills and expenses cost. If his dad wants him to get the game system, why doesn't he buy it? The ex is the asshole for getting involved. You taught your son a needed lesson. Not the asshole. Your ex was a huge one and your son will be if you don't straighten him out. He is nearly a legal adult. He won't get a grasp of reality any younger. Not the asshole. There are so many 16 to 18-year-old kids out there who have no clue what it takes to actually live in the real world. I always worked and bought my own extras, games, CDs, going skating on Friday nights, but I also knew that if I didn't have money to fill up my car that I had daddy to turn to. Even once I had my first place at 18, I knew I could call him. When my dad passed away suddenly when I was 24, I was in complete shock at what it really took to live independently and had to teach myself to budget to survive. Of course it was nice always having what I wanted, but I wish my dad had said no a few times so that I wasn't almost 25 trying to figure it all out. I seriously believe they should teach more in depth on what it takes and how to manage in the world. Not the asshole. He's 17, his father is an adult, they can both start behaving like normal human beings that understand how the world works. Not the asshole. Back when the ex paid child support, he acted like we were having Disneyland fun with his $38 per week. Life's been much easier without it. Why doesn't his father buy it for him? Cheap bastard. Question: how the hell does this have 2K upvotes for having an entirely decided upon comment section? Almost 150 comments are not the asshole, and I only saw 2. Aren't we supposed to upvote answer controversial ones where the answer isn't obviously decided upon, as well as those that are neck and neck, rather than easy ones? I understand that Op is not an asshole for explaining money. The fact that it took until the kid was 17 and the fact that this felt like an "I'll show dad and son who pays the bills around here" moment just lends itself to an air of general ignorance. My son is 11 and I've been divorced for 5 years. While I do not discuss support with my kid in dollar amounts, he understands that everyone is doing their best and this isn't a topic for "gotcha" moments. Just shameful that they went this far without an honest financial discussion. Not the asshole. Welcome to the real world, kid. It a nit cheap. Not the asshole. Your kid and ex, by the sounds of it, needed a reality check. If a budget is good enough for your son and ex to try to argue his point, then it is good enough for you too. Not the asshole. By 17 your son should be financially literate anyway, so he doesn't get hit full in the face with the reality bat in early adulthood. Your husband sounds like he's doing some agitation. Add to this the fact he's acting like a child about you showing your son how adulthood works, and it's highly unlikely he's going to be a good role model as far as finances are concerned. So this was likely a long overdue lesson anyway. Not the asshole. My 16-year-old just bought a Nintendo Switch and a brand new iPhone with money she saved from her summer job. My 12-year-old bought an Apple Watch and pays for his monthly PlayStation subscription thing with money he saved with his summer job. My parents own a business, which is why he is legally able to work, though he doesn't work too much because of child labor laws. My point is, he's definitely old enough to get a job and save to buy his own system. Also, at 17, it's probably time he start getting used to having a job and paying for things. Not the asshole at all. Your ex definitely is though. Not the asshole. It's not like you just busted this out on the kid. He had a flawed budget, and you just gave the actual figures. Wouldn't hurt to talk to him and let him know that wasn't the point at all, but you didn't do anything wrong either.